From the British Columbia Television Newsroom, the Early News with Pamela Martin.
Good afternoon. It was a hoedown instead of a showdown. The Salvation Army is pulling out of Vancouver's Grace Hospital after 67 years, effective March 1st. The decision was announced today by the Army's Lieutenant Colonel David Luganbull. Grace has been owned for the last 10 years by the BC government, but administered by the Salvation Army. Grace had its first baby delivered in 1927. The second baby born there was Grace McCarthy, now leader of the BC Social Credit Party. And the hospital recently recorded birth number 200,000. Luganbull says the Sally Ann has ethical concerns about the direction the healthcare system is taking.
The Salvation Army is a pro-life organization. However, it also has tried to adopt a compassionate approach to couples who are facing difficult pregnancies and non-viable babies. And that gets us into areas of concern that the Salvation Army, with its earlier intention of caring for the unmarried mother and then more recently to provide family-centered obstetrical care, become very complicated for us.
Ontario Premier Bob Rae today hit a bum.
Meeting a philosophical retreat, the Salvation Army pulls out of BC's largest maternity hospital. And whither the first narrows crossing? Are the experts and the public at odds over the Lionsgate replacement?
The News Hour with Tony Parsons.
Good evening. Beginning with a surprising announcement from the Salvation Army and a major change in the delivery of health care in the Lower Mainland. For the past 67 years, the Sally Ann has been in charge of administering Grace Hospital, Vancouver's top maternity facility. Today, it announced it was pulling out, and a big factor in the decision seems to be a fundamental difference in health care ethics.
It is BC's largest nursery. 20 babies born here every day, 7,500 last year. Grace is a hospital where expecting moms line up to get in, a medical facility with a reputation for excellence.
What do you like about the hospital?
The quality of care. The nursing staff is absolutely excellent. The facility is superb. Everything.
As Mom Linda and daughter Nicole get ready to go home, the administrator of the hospital for 67 years is also moving out.
Salvation Army's Governing Council has concluded that it would be in the best interests of health care in British Columbia for the Salvation Army to step aside and allow a new governance to redefine the role of this vital medical care facility.
The original hospital opened in 1927, and through the years, over 200,000 babies have come into the world here. It's a hospital always run with the Christian principles according to the Salvation Army. But with a changing role of medicine today, in defense of those religious beliefs, the Sally Ann has decided to leave Grace.
Recently, the Royal Commission on New Reproductive Technology presented its report after a lengthy delay and an enormous amount of money spent on that study, and that it is our anticipation that as the hospital becomes more and more of a tertiary care facility, that there are going to be ethical issues which fall outside of the Salvation Army's mandate in healthcare.
The problems for the Salvation Army really began with the closure of Shaughnessy Hospital. This was the hospital that handled any abortion problems, any genetic programs that Grace didn't want to deal with. With the closure of Shaughnessy, those procedures came back to Grace, and the Christian organization couldn't deal with it.
I want to emphasize, though, that the Army is not stepping aside because of any request by this ministry or this government. This is a decision that the Army took upon itself, as they expressed it, in the best interest of health care in British Columbia.
And in the hospital today, there was shock and disappointment among the staff that the hospital management is going to change.
It was a bit of a shock that all of a sudden today it has happened, and we have a bit of an emotional tie to the Salvation Army and Grace Hospital as it has been, and there are a lot of employees who have worked here for a lot of years, 30, 35 years, who've got quite an attachment to this establishment.
When I hear about it, it's really a little bit sad, but I think the world will go on. New changes always, we always hope there's a positive sign of it.
The ethical questions that are involved in that often bring into clash, basic religious underpinnings that organizations like the Salvation Army have. And I guess they felt that in the interests of the women of British Columbia, that their ethical standpoint or their religious standpoint wasn't fair to be imposed on the women of British Columbia as a whole.
So on March 1st, the Salvation Army will retreat from Grace, and with the new administration will come a new hospital name.
Now, for more on this, we're joined by our legislative reporter, Clem Chappell, live from Victoria. Clem, was there some element of pushing by the government in this case?
Tony, I don't think it was actual pushing. I think, as someone said to me, no one in this government would be stupid enough to try and push the Salvation Army out of a position like that. I mean, one just wouldn't do that. But I think there probably was a much more subtle push. There have been audits about the hospital administration. There is a feeling around here that they just weren't as good administrators, not as efficient and not as up to date. You know, as we know, a hospital administration is a very, very complex and becoming a much more complex business than it used to be. It's not just kindliness and nice nursing that goes on anymore. It's a real administrative and technological jungle in there. So I think the writing was on the wall. If it had been anybody else administering the hospital in the manner that it was, I'm told that they might have been might have been pushed.
Under the circumstances, with the Salvation Army gone, what changes can we expect to see?
Well, I think that Grace Hospital, and under its new name, is supposed to become part of the biggest and the most up-to-date women's health center of all kinds in Western Canada. So it's going to become a very high-tech and a much more modern facility. And I think time has just passed this one by. And as Brian mentioned, with the change away from Shaughnessy, things are going to start centering at Grace, and time just marches on, and it's going to have a new life.
Thank you, Clem.
Okay.
The Salvation Army is not alone in its discomfort with the dizzying advances in reproductive technology. While for some, particularly infertile couples, they are a dream come true, for others, they're a very dangerous step toward engineering human life. And the debate isn't about to die down, considering what may be available in your local hospital in the near future.
We've gone from the test tube babies of the late 70s to the so-called designer babies of the 90s. Doctors and scientists have been accused of genetic manipulation in their ongoing quest to help infertile women have children. And it's specifically the manipulation of genes that has some people worried.
In the reproductive technologies area, basically the upside of the kinds of technologies that we can bring about are that we can get rid of certain kinds of diseases, which are kind of unpleasant for the people who have them. The downside is that people worry that they might simply be eliminated from the picture entirely. Rather than have their disease eliminated, we might simply just get rid of this fetus and try for another one.
Recently, in fact, the controversy over reproductive technology has been raised in several cases in Britain. One clinic is researching the removal of eggs from aborted fetuses to be fertilized and implanted in infertile women. In another case, a 59-year-old woman, artificially impregnated, has just become the oldest woman on record to bear children.
And I suspect if you ask those children at the age of 20 were they pleased where they were born and they have a happy relationship with their parents, they'll probably say very.
What's clear is that women can't naturally have children at that age. And therefore, if you're going to use particular techniques to help a woman have a baby, you need particular controls as well.
In the States, where there are virtually no regulations governing reproductive technology, infertile women are advertising a $2,000 payout for donor eggs.
When you see that you can get $2,000 for something that sounds simple, give an egg, then you're inclined to look into it a little bit.
Most often, doctors and patients choose sperm and eggs to match the characteristics of the infertile member. A U.S. sperm bank run by a retired engineer offers frozen sperm from Nobel Prize winners, corporate leaders, and star athletes. Interested parties can even shop through a catalog, looking for a donor sperm with the characteristics they want.
The better the human gene pool, the better the individuals will come out of it. And the poorer the human gene pool, the more useless and and detrimental individuals will come out of it. I'm interested in improving the human gene pool.
We all have constraints which are placed to us, on us from birth. We're all born with a certain kind of genetic structure. What disturbs people is that it may be the case in the future that people will have constraints put on them by other human beings.
And Bayerstein says the moral issues and ethical dilemmas aren't going away. In fact, it's just going to get worse.
I think it's going to keep going on. I think we'll make a lot of new discoveries in medicine that will make a difference to people's lives, and every time there's a difference to people's lives, there's going to be an ethical debate about it.
The abortion debate is heating up once again in Ontario. That's where the NDP government is asking a judge to ban anti-abortion picketing at clinics, hospitals, and doctors' homes and offices. The government wants to stop what it calls an orchestrated campaign to harass doctors and patients.
The Salvation Army is pulling out of Grace Hospital.
Sally Ann says it's been under increasing pressure to expand its maternity hospital, expand into areas such as abortion and new reproductive technology, areas where it doesn't feel comfortable. So as Julia Nunes reports, Grace Hospital is looking for a new name and new management.
Babies have been the Salvation Army's business at Grace Hospital for 67 years now, but no more. After more than 200,000 births, the Sally Ann says it's pulling out of this, the busiest maternity hospital in the country. The BC government will take over in March.
It is no longer possible for the Salvation Army to satisfy the expectations of the public, staff, and government.
Luganbull said that with the closure of Shaughnessy Hospital and the new emphasis on integrating health services, the Grace Hospital may soon be expected to provide services the Army just isn't comfortable with. Services like abortion and in vitro fertilization for unmarried women.
In the short term, the concern for us has been the question of abortion. The Salvation Army is a pro-life organization.
The Army insists it jumped and was not pushed by the BC government. The Minister of Health agrees.
In meetings with the hospital, we repeatedly assured the Army that we were not going to ask them to step aside. The Army was looking at the development of the entire area of women's health and reproductive health and all that involves.
But the hospital president says the Sally Ann is probably right to predict a move into new areas of modern technology.
The government has asked us to create a center of excellence for women's health on this site.
But you do expect to do what?
Well, we do expect to maybe involved, if necessary, in vitro fertilization, and we will be involved in some genetic terminations for ethical problems. People do come and require terminations of pregnancy.
Some public health officials say it's time for the Salvation Army to get out of the healthcare system.
They certainly had a place 50, 100 years ago. I just simply don't see it now. They made a major contribution at the time, and now funding for the hospital is 100% from government.
As for job losses or cutbacks at Grace, the government promises there won't be any. The transition team will work on finding a new name and a new governing council by March. Julia Nunes, CBC News, Vancouver.
They say that diamonds...
Canadian peacekeepers as targets again.
That could be the stick, as he liked pushing.
Shocking evidence in a skater's assault case. And contraceptive controversy. Long-term pain.
CTV News with Lloyd Robertson. Imagine.
The Salvation Army bows out of Grace Hospital, citing differences in health ethics. The tunnel versus bridge debate over Burrard Inlet continues, and Disney brings its animation division to town. Maybe. Those stories and Canuck highlights at 11:30.
News. We make it make sense. NewsHour Final with Chris Hebb, substituting for Ted Chernecki.
Good evening. For the past 67 years, the Salvation Army has been in charge of administrating Grace Hospital, the #1 maternity hospital in the province, but no more. In a surprise announcement today, Sally Ann has chosen to depart on a fundamental difference in healthcare ethics.
It is BC's largest nursery. 20 babies born here every day, 7,500 last year. Grace is a hospital where expecting moms line up to get in, a medical facility with a reputation for excellence.
What do you like about the hospital?
The quality of care. The nursing staff is absolutely excellent. The facility is superb. Everything.
As Mom Linda and daughter Nicole get ready to go home, the administrator of the hospital for 67 years is also moving out.
The Salvation Army's governing council has concluded that it would be in the best interests of health care in British Columbia for the Salvation Army to step aside and allow a new governance to redefine the role of this vital medical care facility.
The original hospital opened in 1927, and through the years, over 200,000 babies have come into the world here. It's a hospital always run with the Christian principles according to the Salvation Army. But with a changing role of medicine today, in defense of those religious beliefs, the Sally Ann has decided to leave Grace. The problems for the Salvation Army really began with the closure of Shaughnessy Hospital. This was the hospital that handled any abortion problems, any genetic programs that Grace didn't want to deal with. With the closure of Shaughnessy, those procedures came back to Grace, and the Christian organization couldn't deal with it.
I want to emphasize, though, that the Army is not stepping aside because of any request by this ministry or this government.
And in the hospital today, there was shock and disappointment among the staff that the hospital management is going to change.
We have a bit of an emotional tie to the Salvation Army and Grace Hospital as it has been, and there are a lot of employees who have worked here for a lot of years.
I guess they felt that in the interests of the women of British Columbia, that their ethical standpoint or their religious standpoint wasn't fair to be imposed on the women of British Columbia as a whole.
So on March 1st, the Salvation Army will retreat from Grace, and with the new administration will come a new hospital name.